The giants mentioned in the Bible have always stirred mystery and fascination, even among people who have never read the Old Testament. These massive beings who once walked the earth still remain a puzzle in ancient history. But what many don't realize is that these giants weren't all from one race. There were different tribes and bloodlines, all descended from the Nephilim, hybrid beings born from the union between the sons of God and the daughters of men. Each group had its own traits and played an important role in biblical events. In this video, we'll explore ancient records to uncover who these mysterious post-flood giant races were, as mentioned in the Bible. Prepare to discover hidden truths few people know about. After the Great Flood, the book of Genesis chapter 6 describes one of the most mysterious passages in Scripture, the rise of the giants. The sacred text tells how the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took them as wives, producing a hybrid race called the Nephilim. These giants, powerful and towering, lived before the flood, but somehow appeared again afterward. This raises a question: who exactly were the sons of God? The answer lies in the original Hebrew phrase, B'nai ha-Elohim, which in Aramaic translates to Ba. Both terms are linked to heavenly beings, angels, suggesting that these giants were not just unusually large humans, but a mixed race born from forbidden unions between fallen angels and human women. These fallen angels, known as the Watchers, had abandoned their heavenly duties and became corrupted, seeking to interact with humanity in sinful ways. This means the giants were more than physical anomalies. They were corrupted beings born from spiritual rebellion and chaos. According to the Bible, before the flood, these creatures multiplied across the earth, spreading violence and corruption everywhere. They became one of the main reasons God sent the Great Flood, to cleanse and renew the earth. But the mystery remains. How did these beings reappear after the flood? Scholars have different opinions, but many believe that although the original Nephilim were destroyed, the fallen angels continued to influence humanity. Their dark presence showed up again in new forms, seeding new generations of Nephilim within ancient civilizations. This continuing demonic influence, many believe, led to new waves of spiritual decay and corruption. Historical and biblical sources also suggest that these demonic forces were deeply tied to pagan religions. They were often worshipped through rituals involving priestesses and false gods. The Bible warns repeatedly that these so-called gods were not imaginary, but real demonic entities hiding behind idols, seeking human worship to gain power and control. This strange phenomenon wasn't limited to the Old Testament. During the time of Moses and Aaron, when they stood before Pharaoh, the Egyptian magicians were also able to perform supernatural acts, such as turning their staffs into serpents. This wasn't just a clever trick or illusion. It showed that dark spiritual powers were working through them. It reveals that contact with the supernatural, especially with evil entities, continued to influence the course of human history. The key point here is that even though many people today think these ancient stories are just myths or fables, there are strong hints that these beings, though unseen, are still at work in our world. Their influence is subtle yet powerful, shaping events in ways most people can't perceive. The existence of the Nephilim, before and after the flood, represents more than just people of great size. They symbolize how supernatural forces can quietly but deeply interfere with human affairs. These giants were not simply enormous humans, they were living evidence of celestial rebellion, a mark of corruption that began when fallen angels united with human women, producing a hybrid race of powerful and dangerous beings. Even after the flood, traces of their presence continued. The flood's divine judgment did not completely erase them. It only paused their appearance for a time. Soon after, new generations of giants began to appear, spreading throughout the Middle East and beyond. The Bible describes these giants as mighty warriors, fierce and dominant, who built strongholds, ruled regions, and became great threats to neighboring nations, including Israel itself. According to Scripture, at least 5 different races of giants lived in the vast area stretching from the Levant to Mesopotamia, with strong ties to ancient Egypt. Their descendants spread across lands that are now Israel, Iraq, Syria, and nearby territories. They built fortified cities and established powerful kingdoms that stood as near impossible barriers to anyone who tried to invade or expand. One of the most striking accounts of these mighty beings appears in the book of Numbers, chapter 13. When the Israelites were sent to explore the land of Canaan, they were filled with fear upon seeing the descendants of Anak, one of the most dreaded tribes of giants. The Israelite spies who saw the Anakim described them as towering and terrifying, so massive that the Israelites felt like mere grasshoppers beside them. This account shows not only the physical size and power of these beings, but also the fear and discouragement they brought to the people of Israel. The sight of these giants filled the Israelites with such dread that they nearly gave up on conquering the promised land altogether. The text also highlights that the Canaanites were strong and numerous, living in fortified cities protected by these supernatural beings. Their presence made any attempt at conquest seem nearly impossible. The giants were more than just physical enemies. They represented a spiritual and psychological battle, a clash between divine forces and corrupted ones, between good and evil. Their supernatural origins suggest that the war for the Promised Land wasn't only about territory, it was also a spiritual conflict, a battle over divine authority and the destiny of humankind. In the next part of our exploration, we uncover the 5 races of giants mentioned in Scripture, looking into their origins and the meanings behind their ancient names. Each race carries its own unique story, one that goes beyond physical size and points to deeper supernatural forces that once shaped the world. The first and perhaps most mysterious of these races is the Rephaim. These giants were among the most feared in biblical history and were often connected to the realm of the dead. The name Rapha, singular of Rephaim, carries deep meaning, symbolizing a link to the afterlife. In both Hebrew and Phoenician, Rephaim doesn't simply mean giants. It refers to beings that exist on the border between life and death, almost like spirits or wandering souls that move between the physical and spiritual worlds. But why did ancient people view the Rephaim this way? The answer traces back to the Great Flood, a cataclysm that, according to scripture and ancient traditions, wiped out the original giants who had spread fear and corruption across the earth. The flood destroyed them, but somehow after the waters receded, they returned. How could that be possible? Ancient records suggest that the fallen angels, those powerful beings who rebelled against God, continued to interact with humanity. Worshipped by many ancient cultures as gods, these fallen beings once again united with human women, giving rise to a new generation of giants, continuing the bloodline of the Nephilim. The Rephaim were beyond human in size and strength, true titans whose massive forms inspired terror wherever they appeared. One of the most famous examples is Og, the king of Bashan. Described in the Bible as the last of the Rephaim, his height was said to be around 15 feet tall and over 6 feet wide, a living mountain of flesh and bone. Other members of this race were described with similar proportions, suggesting that their immense size was a defining trait that made them feared by all surrounding nations. The second great race of giants to walk the lands of Canaan and later spread into other regions were the Anakim, descendants of Anak. Like the Rephaim, they were enormous in size and unmatched in strength. But unlike the Rephaim, whose name was linked to the dead, the name Anakim holds a darker and more revealing secret about their origin. The word Anak wasn't just a personal name, it was a key to understanding their true legacy. In ancient Sumerian, Anak or Anakin means sons of those who fell from the sky. This meaning casts a shadow over their beginnings, implying that the Anakim were not merely giant warriors, but direct descendants of divine or supernatural beings, the fallen ones who descended from the heavens. According to ancient traditions, these celestial beings, often seen as fallen angels or pagan gods, came down to earth in defiance of divine law. From their union with humankind, a new line of giants was born. The Anakim, as their descendants, inherited both immense physical strength and a spiritual connection to the otherworldly realm, a legacy that granted them unnatural power and authority over humans. Biblical accounts describe the Anakim as towering warriors, standing far above ordinary men, their heights said to range from 11 to 14 feet tall, and in some cases, even more. Some records suggest that certain Anakim could rival the Refaim, reaching nearly 15 feet in height. Their sheer size made them unstoppable in battle, while their supernatural presence struck fear into all who saw them. Their lineage, descended from the fallen ones, hinted that they were more than human. They were hybrids, beings who carried both physical might and spiritual corruption. The Anakim embodied rebellion against divine order. They were living symbols of resistance against heaven itself, reminders that dark spiritual powers were still active on earth, working to twist and corrupt creation. Because of this, the Anakim were not only feared as invincible warriors, but also regarded as manifestations of evil influence, powerful, proud, and dangerous. Their very existence stood as a warning that the struggle between divine authority and rebellious spiritual forces was far from over. And if the Anakim inspired fear with their strength and celestial descent, there was yet another race of giants, even more terrifying, that haunted the ancient Middle East and spread dread throughout the Levant. These were the Emim. The Emim are mentioned in Scripture, specifically in Deuteronomy 2:10-11, which says, "The Emim had dwelt there in times past, a great and numerous people, as tall as the Anakim." This verse clearly shows that the Emim were compared directly to the Anakim, suggesting they were beings of immense height, likely over 13 feet tall, rivaling even the mighty Rephaim. Their name alone tells a story. According to the Jewish scholar Rabbi Rashi, Emim means fearsome or monstrous. This didn't just describe their terrifying appearance, but also the deep fear they inspired in every nation around them. The name itself hints that their true terror went beyond size. It was their dreadful presence that haunted all who encountered them. Yet what truly set them apart was not just their height or strength, but a terrifying trait that made them unlike any other race of giants: their roar. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, one of the key ancient sources on the giants, wrote that the Emim had a roar so thunderous that it could be compared to the roar of a lion. This deep, guttural sound was said to echo through valleys, freezing even the bravest warriors in fear. Their monstrous cries, combined with their distorted and grotesque features, made them horrifying to behold, their faces twisted in ways that mirrored their inner corruption. While the Anakim were known for their celestial lineage and immense strength, and the Rephaim for their connection to death and the underworld, the Emim stood out as true monsters, beings whose very presence could paralyze the heart with dread. Their power was not only physical but psychological. They represented a darker kind of evil, one that could break the human spirit through terror alone. The Emim became symbols of the lingering corruption that survived the flood, a reminder that evil was not erased from the earth. Their terrifying presence left a lasting scar on the memories of ancient peoples, stories passed down for generations, warning of the horrors that once walked among men. The fourth race of giants to dominate the ancient Middle East were the Zuzim. Though less famous than the Emim or Anakim, they too were remembered in the ancient texts as one of the colossal tribes that ruled parts of the region. The name Zuzim, derived from an Aramaic term, means strong, rigid, or mighty, perfectly describing both their massive build and their incredible strength. Records suggest that the Zuzim stood between 9 and 13 feet tall, making them formidable warriors and towering presences wherever they went. Like the other giant races, the Zuzim were part of the mysterious hybrid lineages that descended from supernatural beings, traces of the ancient unions between the heavenly and the earthly. Though their history is not as detailed as that of the Anakim or Emim, the Bible still records their existence in Genesis 14. There, the Zuzim appear in the story of a great war led by Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, who launched a brutal campaign across the region. During this invasion, the Zuzim, who lived in the land of Ashtaroth-Karnaim, were among the tribes that fell before his army. Their downfall marks one of the earliest biblical mentions of the destruction of a giant race, showing that even these titanic beings were not immune to divine or human judgment. The massacre of the Zuzim marked one of the many brutal chapters in the ancient war between humans and giants. Their defeat signaled the decline of the great races of old, spreading their downfall across distant lands and weakening their grip on the world. But this was not just an isolated battle. It was part of a larger and ongoing conflict between humanity and supernatural forces that once ruled the earth. The fall of the Zuzim represented, in a symbolic sense, a momentary victory for mankind, a fleeting triumph in a struggle that had raged since before the flood. Yet their destruction raised deeper questions. How deeply had these supernatural beings shaped the world of the ancients? And even after their downfall, how much of their influence still lingered, quietly shaping the destiny of nations? The giants described in ancient traditions, especially in the Bible, were never just about great size or physical might. They represented cosmic rebellion, spiritual corruption, and the distortion of divine order. From the Rephaim to the Zuzim, each race embodied a different face of evil: violence, arrogance, defiance, or chaos that infected the world after the flood. Even as these colossal beings were hunted, defeated, and erased from the earth, their memory refused to fade. Their names became woven into legend and scripture, whispered through generations as warnings that evil is never truly gone. It merely hides, waiting for another moment to rise. The legacy of the giants reminds us that unseen forces have always influenced human history, shaping civilizations in mysterious and often terrifying ways. And so we come to the final race of giants mentioned in the Old Testament, one of the most mysterious and least understood of them all: the Zamzumim. These giants once inhabited lands east of the Jordan River, in the heart of the ancient Middle East. They were the last known remnants of the monstrous bloodlines that had ruled vast territories for generations. Though scripture mentions them only briefly, the Zamzumim stand as a haunting reminder of an era when divine and corrupted forces still clashed upon the earth. Little is known about their exact origins or how they met their end. Yet what we do know paints a fearsome picture. The Zamzumim were immense in size and unmatched in strength, standing between 13 and 15 feet tall, making them among the largest of all the giant races ever recorded. Like the Zuzim and the Emim before them, the Zamzumim were known for their raw power and terrifying presence. They ruled their territories with dominance and aggression, establishing strongholds that few dared to challenge. Ancient accounts portray them as formidable warriors, their presence alone enough to strike fear into neighboring tribes. They were among the last of the colossal tribes to walk the earth, the dying echo of a world where giants once shaped the fate of humanity. The Zamzumim occupied strategic territories and ruled vast regions, exerting control over any community that dared to come near. For a time they were unmatched, towering rulers of fertile lands and strongholds across the Middle East. But as history has shown time and again, even the mightiest fall before the relentless march of time. The Bible records how the Ammonites, descendants of Lot, came into direct conflict with the Zamzumim. These two peoples fought fiercely for the fertile lands east of the Jordan, lands once dominated by the giants. In the end, the Ammonites triumphed, defeating the Zamzumim and claiming their territory. Gradually, every trace of the ancient race was erased from the land. This battle marked more than a simple territorial victory. It symbolized the end of the age of giants, the final turning point when humanity rose and the great lineages of supernatural beings disappeared. With the fall of the Zamzumim, the old world ruled by celestial hybrids, and colossal creatures gave way to a new order, an age of humankind, where nations began to grow and civilizations took root. Some scholars believe that the Zamzumim were actually a branch of the Rephaim, another ancient race of giants mentioned in the Bible. If true, this would mean their presence stretched beyond the Jordan, into Syria, Canaan, and parts of what is now Israel. This theory suggests that in the distant past, enormous regions of the Middle East were dominated by these giant races, and that the Zamzumim were among the last remnants of a dying bloodline, a race hunted and defeated by the rising tribes of men until their final extinction. There is also another interpretation. Some believe that the word Zamzumim may come from the Hebrew root meaning plotters or conspirators. This would suggest that these giants were not only physically powerful, but also strategically intelligent, capable of forging alliances, manipulating others, and forming secret pacts to preserve their dominance. If true, their fall may not have come purely from military defeat, but from betrayal, cunning politics, and spiritual corruption, a reminder that even supernatural strength cannot overcome divine justice. With their final defeat at the hands of the Ammonites, one of the last known lineages of giants recorded in the Old Testament came to an end. Yet their story, though cloaked in mystery, continues to echo, as a timeless symbol of the struggle between humanity and the forces that existed before it. The wars and battles described in Scripture were never only physical. They were spiritual wars, reflections of the ongoing conflict between divine order and rebellion, light and darkness. The extinction of the Zamzumim marked the close of an ancient era, but their legend never truly died. Their memory still lives on in myths, oral traditions, and sacred writings, a haunting reminder of when giants once walked the earth. Even now, these stories captivate scholars, theologians, mystics, and researchers of the occult, all searching for the hidden truth behind the giants and their connection to humanity's forgotten past. The Zamzumim may have vanished from the pages of biblical history, but their legacy endures, a whisper from an age when heaven and earth collided, when men battled forces far beyond their understanding. They remind us that deep within human memory lies a record of that ancient struggle, between man and the unseen, between the mortal and the divine. And though the giants themselves have long disappeared, their shadow still lingers, echoing through time in the stories, symbols, and mysteries that continue to shape our understanding of the world today. Thank you for watching. May God bless you, and see you soon.